the IAs, when done correctly, protect the good cops, protect the agencies. But when they're not done correctly, they harm the good cops, they harm the agencies, and you oust the people that you should be wanting to keep for a whole career. And I would be like, we're adults. You can tell me why I'm getting in trouble if I've broken a rule. Like, we don't need a whole investigation. Just ask me. We need goons. We need door kickers. We need guys that are going to go in and do police shit when police needs to be done.
Welcome back to Internal Affairs, a police podcast here. The IA guy with another special guest, all the way to the wonderful state of Iowa. I got to tell you a little bit about Kent Keller, which, by the way, it kind of sounds like a, I don't know if it sounds like a movie type of stage name or maybe even a comic, but we're going to get to know Kent a little bit. But I got to bring him on because he graduated the academy in 2011 and he won the top driver award in his class. Kent Keller is Code 6. What's up, brother?
How you doing? Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, bro. Hey, thanks for showing up, taking some time off your busy schedule. You and I have, kind of talked about a little bit about what you do. First and foremost, I just want to make sure that we recognize your wonderful achievement, your outstanding award of the top driver in your academy class. First and foremost, was it an announcement? Did you get a placard? Talk to me. What happened, bro?
So there's still some controversy on the top driver situation. So apparently the top driver is meant to be a two-part award of the best driving score and the best written score, which involved, like all the revised statute laws for like running emergent and, what we are do and shall do and all that other good stuff. So I was one off on the written score, but got a perfect driving score. The kid who actually won had a perfect written score and had a few off on the driving score, but collectively that was weighted more towards the written. So he got the best driver score despite not being the best driver. So I just made my own plaque, and on the awards day, I just actually held it up and said, like, no, this is actually the real one. And I still have that, so I don't care what anybody says. That's the actual one, so we're going to run with that.
Let's run with it, and we'll definitely notify. I believe that's help me out here. What academy is that?
So Red Rocks is the academy, but the CSP, Colorado State Patrol, were our instructors, and he didn't. He's still the instructor is still a trooper, and he did not like me, which is fair. But so I think there's a little bit of that.
If he's watching, or if the CSP is Code 6, when they'll be watching, we'll definitely let him know that the real deal is here, and that's just the way it goes, right?
Captain A, he knows who he is.
Hey, man, look, let's have a little fun because internal affairs, as you and I both know, is not a fun topic. One, two, it's very taboo. I got to ask you, and I'm super curious to know that when you and I connected, I think it was on LinkedIn. I know we have a friend in common, but when you first saw something that has to do with internal affairs, especially a police podcast, just kind of wondering, what were your thoughts, man?
Initially, I was a little concerned that it was like the special forces of IA. So like the headhunters for the cops, like if you get a cop, you really just can't nail down, you're sending in that guy. And I jokingly say that because I've had some pretty terrible results of IAs and run-ins with them. And until I got to the last agency that I retired from, who's in my opinion, is the only agency I've worked for that's done IAs correctly. And so once I did a little bit more digging on you, then realized kind of the point of the podcast and support it fully. So,
yeah. I asked that because my next question to you is, why do you think that after all these decades, internal affairs still carries that negative stigma?
Kind of like I touched on, I think it's because a lot of agencies aren't really sure how to do it correctly. And understandably, they're going to err on the side of protecting the agency and protecting the town, the city, the county that employs them. But I think that there's a line that needs to be toted between protecting the entity that you work for and protecting the officers and the deputies and the troopers that work for you. And I think that a lot of line level guys feel that it's not so much a line that's being toted as here's the line and it's way over here. And it's always, if I'm in an IA, it's because they're already decided that I'm in trouble and they're just going to get it on paperwork and all this other stuff. But I think when it's done correctly, then it's to everybody's benefit if you're doing the job correctly.
Right. Do you think also it's because perhaps the way we treat each other? And what I mean by that is, haven't you witnessed or maybe even experienced yourself where the treatment is actually the punishment as opposed to the penalty? The
Mm-hmm.
by you going through all this, next thing you know, you're ousted. You're in the island all alone, as I like to say it, or walking through that dark alley, hoping that this gets adjudicated. And here's
Mm-hmm.
the deal: even if it's sustained, right? Even if you did say, "Okay, I understand. I neglected my duty. I failed to do this. I get it," but that whole process, man, don't you think that
Mm-hmm.
better?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think a lot of that with a lot of what we do is communication. And some agencies communicate that like the process and the steps and the reason why behind. And I
Yeah,
think there's a lot of agencies that don't, and that's what irritates. You can't hire a bunch of men and women to literally go be sleuths and then expect them to not sleuth when you say that they're in trouble and they're on IA leave.
yeah,
So I think it's this double-edged sword of the IAs, when done correctly, protect the good cops, protect the agencies. But when they're not done correctly, they harm the good cops, they harm the agencies, and you oust the people that you should be wanting to keep for a whole career.
yeah. No, 100%. Hey, man. So I got to ask you this though: if you're in a room full of sergeants, okay, and they're getting ready to begin their tour as an investigating officer in internal affairs, what's that one thing you want them to know about their job?
That the point of your job as an IA sergeant isn't to again protect an officer, to protect an agency, to protect yourself. It's to be the fact finder of the agency. It's the same thing that we do day in and day out as cops, except it's for one of our own. And it kind of falls back on the reason I think officers feel like that is we're trained very specifically to investigate things in a criminal way. And so many times I've seen it where, like, hey, you're the new IA sergeant, here you go. And then the officers complain they feel like they're in a criminal investigation. Well, you gave a guy with one tool, a hammer, that's the only thing he has, and then expect him to do this thing that requires a lot of the same skill set, but it's just through a different lens. And when they don't tweak that, especially if the agency doesn't give them the opportunity or the training or the know-how to do that, it's just negative.
Yeah, no, totally. Sometimes I feel this though. A lot of agencies, guests that have come on to the podcast, uh, I start thinking about the small agencies and the opportunities of the fact that they perhaps didn't get the training or maybe they weren't prepared to actually do the job and they were voluntold, as we like to say, right?
Yep. Yep.
Or as a sense of punishment. Hey, you're going to go to IA, and this is your assignment, and here you go, figure it out.
I've never understood giving somebody an assignment and then being mad at them when they don't do that assignment well that you made it a blatantly clear was a punishment to them. It's like, okay, well, this is the thing I hate. What are you going to punish me with more? I'll just do bad at this. Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. Hey man, look, I know you got yourself into a car accident that kind of caused you to resign, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But here's a little fun question. In 11 years you did, right? So you started
Yep.
2011, you gave it up in 2022. Tell me about that one job that you wish you could have done, but you never had an opportunity to do so, if any.
I kind of half-heartedly did it, in the sense that I was a DUI guy. So I was always a traffic guy, always nighttime, night shift voluntarily because that's where drunks live, majority of the
Okay.
time. So that's where I like to work. And I always worked at smaller agencies that didn't have the need for a full-time traffic or DUI unit. And
Okay.
so I always wanted to do that. Luckily, when you work at smaller agencies, as the guys who work at smaller agencies know, it really gets divvied up pretty quick. It's like, I like drug stuff and warrants, and I like DUIs, and I'll take everything else that's just paperwork to avoid any actual police work. And so we find those guys, and I was always the DUI guy. So I'd always get the permission to leave out a sector and go do a DUI because it'd get done faster and I enjoyed it. So I pseudo fell into that, but I never got to be an actual like Wednesday through Saturday. All I do is drunks. Don't call me about anything else. I just get to run hot all over the city to the fun stuff and then back to finding drunk. So It was never I always thought SWAT was cool for a minute until I realized it was just either the hottest day ever, the coldest day ever, and you're just sitting there for hours. And I hate waiting and standing. So it wasn't that for me.
And for me, man, you got to wear all that stuff, dude. I mean,
Oh, it's so heavy.
and it's, yeah, you got to just, you know what? I applaud all my shout out to my Metro guys in LEPD who work Metropolitan Division and the ones end up in the D platoon and SWAT. I just have such a great admiration for everyone who has done that. A little secret of mine is I'd be the first one to tell you I came on the job when I was 30 years old. Had I would have came on the job when I was 21, that's probably something that rappelling off buildings sounds like
All
dangerous.
right. Yeah. Oh, yeah. If I always offered if they ever needed somebody to just drive the Bearcat through the front door with
There
that
you
big stick
go.
on the front,
That
I'm
sounds
that
like a
guy.
lot of fun, bro.
Yep. I'll
That's
drive.
gonna be a lot
Don't
of
worry.
fun. Yeah, it's got to be a lot of fun. Hey man, look, here's the IA story. Look, so let's round you up. I came up with 10. You know, the over and under on your career that you didn't know is that you ended up with I would have said probably 8. I mean, I got to know you now that I finally put the face with the voice. I'm thinking this guy looks like the over and under is like maybe 5, on IAs.
Yeah.
And
Probably a little higher than that.
you ended up with 10 plus. Uh,
Yeah.
you don't mind sharing, and I believe, and you can refresh my memory, but you and I were talking on the phone, and you were telling me something very significant about your last IA or something that you were investigating. If you don't mind sharing with us so we can get some lessons learned, because this is what it's really all about.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm sure there's a lot of guys that are watching that's like, Jesus, 10 IAs? How did you become a cop for that long? And that's my issue with when IAs aren't done correctly, is I
Right.
think 7 of those should have been at most like a sergeant looking at it. And they resulted in nothing, but they do this long process, and it's to protect me and to protect the agency. But then when I apply to a new agency, I have to explain why I have 10 IAs. Because they're thinking we do IAs for like shootings and violent assaults and sexual assault allegations and these serious things that IAs are meant for. And until I worked at Greeley PD, my last agency, I never worked at an agency that treated them, in my opinion, correctly.
Mhm.
The one that we were talking about, I think it was one of my first shifts as the acting supervisor. So I'm already nervous, like not actually a supervisor. I get none of the pay, but all of the responsibility. So, I'm just asking my team, like, guys, please, let's get me through the night. I don't want to get in trouble. I'm trying to get a promotion eventually. And of course, I back into a sign like an hour into the shift. So I call my sergeant, explain what happened. I'm like, it's a little scratch, but of course, it's, when I'm the supervisor, and he's like, just take photos for me. We had a lot of security cameras around. If you can
Uh-huh.
find footage of it, pull the cameras, which there was. Send me all that in an email. Just type up like a quick incident report of what happened. He's like, I'm going to write you a letter that says I expect you not to back into polls. And I was like, that's fair.
Uh-huh.
And he was like, thanks for letting me know, and I'll see you tomorrow. I was like, okay. So I worked the rest of the night, come home, go back in the next night. He meets me in the parking lot, which isn't normal for him, and says, I'm really sorry, dude. I'll explain later. And then we walk inside together, directly to the lieutenant's office, who sits me down and tells me that I'm on IA leave. And I was like, for what? And he was like, we're investigating an accident. And they say it all like aloof, like I'm not the one who did the thing and also instigated the investigation into it.
Right.
And I was like, the one last night? And he goes, yeah, yeah. And I was like, the one that I self-reported and did all the exculpatory evidence on myself? And he was like, yes. And I was like, all right, I'm just making sure we're talking about the same one. And he goes, yep. So you're on IA leave, so no need to change out tonight. You just head home. I'll have the detective sergeant call you in the morning, and yeah, we'll get to the bottom of this. And I was like, oh, I got to the bottom of it last night. It's in an email to the sergeant. And
Wow.
my sergeant was like, okay, and he knew where it was going. And he was like, I'll walk him out. Thanks, sir. And then he was like, I'll call you later. So I'm like ranting and raving. Called my attorney through our union, and they dealt with this a lot. And he was like, are you fucking kidding me again? And he's like, for real, did you do anything? And I told the same story. And he was like, and you're on leave, like actual, you cannot go into the building. Yep, full leave. And he goes, you want a vacation? And I was like, yeah, what are you thinking? And he was like, I can't get up there for a week and a half, 2 weeks to do
Yeah.
your interview. And I was like, okay. So I called the sergeant, and he was like, are you seriously got an attorney for this, man? It'll take like 10 minutes. Just come in. And I was like, are you really calling me, trying to get me to come in without my attorney for something that's not a big deal? I agree it's not a big deal. That's why it should be a sergeant review, or just take all the evidence I gave you and then write me a letter. I'm fine with that.
Yeah, but you made it a big deal.
Yeah. So now it's a big deal. So yeah, 2 weeks later, I got a 2 week vacation, came in, did my interview, which took all of 10 minutes because they had the full 2 page report I wrote. And then I got a letter that was the same one my sergeant was going to give me that said, "Hey, I expect you not to back into patrol or back into polls. Thanks for letting us know about it." So all of this was an actual official IA case number and everything, where it could have been just what it was, which is me saying like, "I made an oopsie. Here's all the evidence of the oopsie." And my sergeant being like, "Can't do oopsies. You damaged the vehicle. Here's a letter." Fair. End of the day. But not what happened.
Right. Do you think that's just practices, culture, or just self-serving on the part of of command staff? What do you think?
I I don't think at that agency, which wasn't Greeley, at no IAs at Greeley, I think that agency was them being so concerned about protecting something about the like the credibility. I don't think they were doing it in a malice way against me.
Uh-huh.
I think that they just in their mind they were like, well, an IA is to make sure you didn't do anything wrong and to clear the agency and that nothing else was done wrong.
Right.
And we didn't really have like a supervisory level. It was just an email or this IA. And I for years I worked there and I was like, please, can we have something in between that's not an
Uh,
IA, but that's not just an email investigation. And so I think had they had better training, uh, then it would have gone a little bit different. And they've since had a whole new command staff there, and they've flipped it around from what I've heard of doing
Good.
it correctly. But he came from a bigger agency in another state, so I think you kind of need that whole like new fresh breath sometimes in agencies that are small and stagnant to really get things moving.
I got to ask you this, and let me pose it this way: You've had 10 plus IAs. Do you now having to reflect as we're talking right now? Do you think that every single one of those IAs had to be an IA? Or could have it been handled different?
Oh, I think the majority of them could have just been either nothing or supervisor reviews.
Mm-hmm.
Um, where and that's really what it was. Like there's IA files that are huge because there's multiple victims. It
Right.
occurs over several incidents. Yada yada yada. All of these were essentially a page that if you read it, you were like, yeah, this seems straightforward. Why was this an investigation? Which was always my issue. Is I don't mind eating crow. I don't mind. I make mistakes. Write me a
Yeah.
letter. Give me a day off. That's fine. But like it seemed like they didn't feel justified doing that unless there was an IA attached to it. And I
Yeah.
would be like, we're adults. You can tell me why I'm getting in trouble if I've broken a rule. Like, we don't need a whole investigation. Just ask me. Yeah, I did it. I broke that rule. And they're like, okay, see you next week. Okay, I'll take the day off. Like, I think there's a lot of it that the IAs are just unnecessary. And
Yes.
they're really not IAs if you look at what went into them. They just use the term IA. But on background investigations, you have to admit to that if that's, what
Right.
they're
You have
asking.
to do all that. Absolutely. And you already mentioned that things have gotten better at these departments.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep.
You think that's because there's better training, or there's just more awareness, or is it just best practices?
I think it's really easy to want to make big changes in a department when you bring in a new outside guy or girl, because it's not, if you move up from sergeant, now you're the chief and all these issues are happening, you were there at every step of the way. And so I think if now you address them, it can look bad on you. Like, well, why didn't you do anything when you were the deputy chief or the commander or the sergeant?
Yeah.
But when you bring in somebody from outside the organization, and the chief, I forget his first name, but it's Callahan at my old agency.
Mhm.
But he came in and I talked to some of the guys that I'm still close with over there and had like one-on-ones with them, had a big group meeting with the agency because it's small enough. Everybody had the same kind of concerns about the way things were done. And then he listened and implemented those changes um, to the best of his ability. And it's one of those was the IA process and like doing it less formal for things that don't need to be IAs. And that's been huge for them.
That's good. Awesome, man. I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah.
Hey, worst incident in your career?
Uh, Worked a lot of car accidents and like fatals doing that, obviously DUI and traffic guy and working in the bigger cities towards the end of my career. But I think in the smaller towns, you just get closer with everybody. And so when things happen there, they're extra bad. When I was at Sterling, I was on our overnight shift and we worked 12 to 12, so 6 p.m. to 6 a. And about 11 p.m., we got a runaway juvenile call of a 14-year-old kid that got in a fight with his mom because he brought home a girl and the mom didn't like her. And so the girl left crying, and the kid was like, I hate you. I can't believe you said that to her. And then they all went to bed. And then a couple hours later, mom went in to check on him and he was gone. And so she was like, well, he's probably just walking around. He gets upset and does this sometimes. So, it's slow night. We have 4 or 5 officers just trolling the town, all the parks, all the places that a kid would go, um, answering calls in between, but, semi nice night, slower night. So in between calls, we're just all looking.
Uh-huh.
Don't find this kid. Kind of early and like kids having cell phones. So we couldn't ping anything. And then we get off at 6. So we had take home cars. So we're all going home. And then we get tones like right as I'm getting in and shutting off my radio. So I'm listening to them. And it's a man in the park with a gun call. And so I'm still dressed. So I turn around, come back on duty and head over there. We can see that it's a guy leaning up against the tree with a gun in his hand, but we can't get to a good angle without getting in the line of fire.
Mhm.
And then somebody with a scope comes on scene and sees that, like, hey, that's a pretty pale hand that's holding that gun. Like, I don't think he's going to answer commands, kind of pale. And we got there, and it was that kid from the call.
Oh,
And what his parents didn't know is he took one of his dad's handgun, and like never in trouble at school, never in trouble with drugs, never threatened suicide, didn't ever see a therapist, so they didn't think to go like check the safe.
right.
And my shift partner that night had a kid that was like exactly the same age, that had like kind of the same like long surfery hair that this kid had.
Mhm.
And it like wrecked him for like a month.
Can only
So
imagine.
it was rough for me, but like seeing him like that was, I don't have kids, so I couldn't empathize the same way, but it was rough. So
Wow. Yeah, thanks for
yeah.
coming, man. Sometimes when you talk about humanizing the badge, right? A lot of
Mhm.
people who are watching and listening don't really get to see or hear or even feel when you tell the story about such tragedies. And, which is one of my reasons to launch a police podcast. And I'm a true believer that there's never going to be enough platforms for us to voice, our profession, our opinions, and definitely our stories that we'll carry with us for the rest of our lives. How long ago was this?
2013.
Yeah.
So
See,
right before I left, yeah.
yeah, here we are 11 years later, and it's vivid in your mind. Yeah.
Yep. Forever.
Hey, man, OS Media Group, talk to me, man. What's going on with your company, bro? Talk to me.
Yeah. So I kind of fell into it when I took the PIO and media relations manager assignment at my last agency that I retired from. And turns out I was pretty decent at it. And my best man at my wedding, college roommate, friend since childhood,
Uh-huh.
happens to be a graphic designer, video editor, and just does this as well. And so he's the visual side, like designs all this kind of stuff.
Huh?
And then I do all of the police related things, obviously with my background. So like PIO, press releases, op-ed pieces for command staff, will ghostwrite, and just kind of fell into it. And as I started dealing with more, especially smaller agencies around us in Colorado and in other states, I noticed that their PIO was usually just a guy who was either the desk sergeant, the IA sergeant, the detective sergeant, somebody who wasn't on the street, or somebody who's on the street that's just good with Facebook.
Yeah.
Um, and you can tell, like, if that's not their first job, they're going to do their first assignment, which is being a detective sergeant or an IA sergeant, and then the Facebook will come later. And I think that's the kind of niche that I saw that we could fill. Is you don't need a full-time person there. Let us help, get to your community members better. We'll make you look a little bit better. We'll make you sound better doing it. And then that way, when you have important stuff to share, you actually have a following of your community that is there to receive whatever you're sharing with them.
Okay. Nice, man. And it's grown to do not just one agency, but a couple, or what's going on with that?
Yeah, yeah. So we got a couple public service agencies. Obviously, we focus on the police side of it just because that's my background. But first responders are first responders, and once we sit down and talk with them, I can adapt our social media strategy to firefighters, EMTs, municipalities, all that other good stuff. And then the other half of our business is service-based businesses. So again, cops are essentially blue collar guys is the way I've always
Yeah.
looked at it.
Yeah.
So we deal with like a lot of like concrete builders, deck guys, just service guys and gals that we can talk to normally, that, enjoy having a little bit of fun with their social media and their brand. So it's kind of fun. You get to do a little bit of the both. I get to still help out agencies and officers that I worked with and know personally. And then still get to have a lot more fun because not everybody hates a plumber the way that they hate cops. So I can kind of do a lot more.
Really? Is that's I
Yeah.
never even knew that people
Right.
really uh they should have an IA department. Is that what we're getting?
Exactly. So I'm saying, yeah, I think there's a lot of bad plumbers. We just haven't looked into it. So we don't have a whole section of other plumbers to look into them. So
Thanks for sharing, brother. Hey man, look, we're about to wrap it up. God, I had so much fun getting to know you, Kent. Hey man, any advice you have for anyone who wants to come on and become a cop? I'll leave the floor up to you. What kind of advice you have for them, bro?
yeah, first, thanks for having me. Also had a great time chatting. Yeah, for the new cops, when you're in the academy, you get all these guys that come in, they've been on for like 3 or 4 years, and they're like, don't listen to all these salty old guys, like I'm never going to be salty. And then they become the salty old guys. And then the guys in the academy, like, it'll happen. You'll see more. You'll deal with the same people. It's all the stuff that you hear from every academy instructor that comes in that has the same spiel about what the job entails. But despite all of the negativity from those salty dudes and the media and everything, like it's a noble profession. It's a needed profession. We need good cops. We need cops that don't want to do just TikTok dances. I think there's a very valuable place for community outreach officers and to do those kind of things. But we need goons. We need door kickers. We need guys that are going to go in and do police shit when police shit needs to be done.
Yeah.
And so if that's you, not every department does that, but I promise you there are departments, usually in the Southeast,
Yeah.
in the Midwest, that will let you do that. And, there's still work to be done there. So don't listen to all the salty guys. It's easy to fall into that negativity, especially once you get on, but there's still a lot of good work to be done.
That's awesome, brother. Hey, man, thank you so much. Please enjoy the rainy weather that you've been
Oh
experiencing
yeah,
in the state of
absolutely.
Iowa, right?
There
Des
you
Moines. Are
go.
you close to Des Moines? It's Des Moines? Is that correct?
Yeah, it's Des Moines is how it's actually pronounced. Everybody likes to pronounce it Des Moines
Yeah,
around here just because it's funny.
pretty
But
bad.
yeah, I'm just over the river in Omaha, so I'm a Nebraska kid. Iowa just has way cheaper taxes.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't like Iowa as much as I like Nebraska, but I like cheap taxes, so it's part of the reason
I
I'm
hear
here.
you. I hear you loud and clear, brother. Hey, man, I do know that you're going to make it to California. You're not going to be
For
far from
sure.
the studio. And please get a hold of me because I'd love to bring you into the studio so that
A lot
we have,
nicer.
yeah, man, so we can chop it up. And I'm sure there'll be a viral incident somewhere, and you and I can talk about it all day, man.
Right. If not, I'll make one. Don't worry about it.
Let's do it for sure. Hey, bro, thanks for showing up and
I appreciate it.
wrap it up.
No
On that note,
worries.
like always, please be safe out there and don't forget to go Code 6. Thank you.